friends, let's get right into it. Mark chapter 5, starting at verse 21. Jesus got into the boat again and went back to the other side of the lake, where a large crowd gathered around him on the shore. Then a leader of the local synagogue, whose name was Jairus, arrived. When he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet, pleading fervently with him. "My daughter is dying," he said. "Please come and lay your hands on her, heal her so she can live." Jesus went with him, and all the people followed, crowding around him. A woman in the crowd had suffered for 12 years with constant bleeding. She had suffered a great deal from many doctors, and over the years she had spent everything she had to pay them, but she had gotten no better. In fact, she had gotten worse. She had heard about Jesus, so she came up behind him through the crowd and touched his robe, for she thought to herself, "If I can just touch his robe, I will be healed." Immediately the bleeding stopped, and she could feel in her body she had been healed of her terrible condition. Jesus realized at once that healing power had gone out from him, so he turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my robe?" His disciples said to him, "Look at this crowd pressing around you. How can you ask who touched me?" But he kept on looking around to see who had done it. Then the frightened woman, trembling at the realization of what had happened to her, came and fell to her knees in front of him and told him what she had done. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace. Your suffering is over." While he was still speaking to her, messengers from the home of Jairus, the leader of the synagogue, they told him, "Your daughter is dead. There's no use troubling the teacher now." But Jesus overheard them and said to Jairus, "Don't be afraid, just have faith." Then Jesus stopped the crowd and wouldn't let anyone go with him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. When they came to the home of the synagogue leader, Jesus saw much commotion and weeping and wailing. He went inside and asked, "Why all this commotion and weeping? The child isn't dead. She's only asleep." The crowd laughed at him, but he made them all leave, and he took the girl's father and mother and his 3 disciples into the room where the girl was lying. Holding her hand, he said to her, "Talitha cum," which means, "Little girl, get up." And the girl, who was 12 years old, immediately stood up and walked around. They were overwhelmed and totally amazed. Jesus gave them strict orders not to tell anyone what had happened, and he told them to give her something to eat. Friends, you know what I've been tempted to do right now, and maybe we will do it sometime, although probably not now that I say this. I'm tempted to not preach. I'm tempted to just set a 10, 15-minute timer and say, you know what would change your life more than listening to another sermon? It would be praying for 15 minutes. It would be reaching out to Jesus with all that you know right now and just praying to him. It might be a waste of our time, disappoint a few of you who have gathered together, but for some of you, it would change your life. 15 minutes of prayer could change your life, not because you put in the effort, but because God would touch you. But the effort, the faith, that's what we're after, friends. You know, as a church, we're not after how many views for this video, just like we're not about how many people attend this church. What we are about is how many followers, how many disciples of Jesus Christ there are in this world. And I think one thing that has become apparent in these times is so many of you have to answer that question. Am I just an attender or am I a follower of Jesus Christ? So for some of you, you need to pause this, get to your knees, or go on a walk and pray. So, Siri, set a timer for 15 minutes. Hey, Google, lock the door. I don't know if any of you have that smart home stuff, but if you do, Alexa, order Reese's Pieces for Pastor Brooks. If you need my mailing address, I'll help you with it. Reese's Pieces. Alexa, order Reese's Pieces. If that happens in any of your homes, please let me know. That's hilarious. I just wanted to do that. But we need an interruption. We need an interruption in our life. We see a very interesting story, especially when you look at things through the eyes of COVID-19. We look at so many things now through different lenses, things that we used to do, and now we go, ew, look at all the germs that were spread there. I read this story and I look at the crowd around Jesus, and then I see that he goes into somebody's home. And I think this is a powerful story because in it we see things about touch, we see things about crowds, and we see things about healing. And I think not only is some of that stuff more interesting now as we process it, but I really believe that there needs to be some instantaneous healing that goes on in people's homes, physically maybe, but definitely in souls. So all of this story that I just read for you really has within it a big interruption. There is a couple of characters here. Jesus for sure at the center of it, the Son of God walking on this earth, fully God and fully man, and he's going to heal somebody. Now, Jairus is somebody who's important, right? He is a leader. And he has a daughter, a 12-year-old daughter who is sick. Now, that hits close to my heart. I have some 11-year-old daughters. And so this is a very pressing need. He is not bothering Jesus with nothing at all. But as they're going to do this, Jesus is interrupted. Jesus is on his way to do something important, and he's interrupted with something important. You know, a lot of things in life are interruptions. Somebody said that life is what happens to you while you're making other plans. There are so many obstacles and opportunities that come our way. They're interruptions. And I just want to tell you, plan on interruptions. Plan on job loss. Plan on death. Plan on people you didn't see coming. Because Jesus has unplanned things happen to him. So if Jesus has things that seem like interruptions, why would we think we're spared? Because interruptions really, they show us a couple things. That some things, though they seem unplanned, unscripted entirely in our eyes, God totally sees them coming. Do you see how old this little girl is? Do you see how long this woman has been suffering? 12 years. 12 years. And this guy may say, I have this young daughter, she has this immediate pressing illness. Well, this woman has had 12 years, and at the same time, there is this collision. There is this Jesus killing two birds with one stone. Now, Jesus doesn't seem to kill birds here, I know, but there is this combination of faith that happens. Not only does Jesus heal this sick woman who's been sick for many years, but he does more than just raise a 12-year-old girl's health level a little bit. He brings her from death to life. And what did that do to Jairus' faith? Holy cow. And so many times I think that we think God's just doing something in my heart and that's not going to affect somebody else. You might be in the middle of somebody else's story. You might be like this woman who's been bleeding for 12 years. You know, many of us, we know this story a little bit, but we know the middle part of it so well. We know the interruption part of it so well. Some of you don't know this story at all. But I want you to see that divine interruptions can put us back on the right track. I really believe maybe this great interruption that we're going through, God is going to put you on the right track. You are going to marry somebody that you should not have married. Now, that's not a word for everybody, but some of you, you were planning to do something and God is trying to say, hey, don't do that thing. I've got your attention. I want you to see that there is the sovereignty of God over our lives. And God has more good for us to do than we could have ever found on our own, and he brings it our way. And so there is interruption, and then there is this infirmity. I'm going to share with you a couple of things that start with the letter I here. There is interruption, and there is the infirmity of this woman. There is the sickness of this woman. She has been so sick, and she has spent all of her money to try and get well, and now she doesn't have any money, and she's even worse off. I heard this quote years ago that has just stuck with me. It says that many of us, we trade our health to get some money. That is, we work ourselves to death to get some money. And then, at the end of our lives, we're so sick from working hard, we spend all of that money on our health. So we trade money for health, and then later we want to trade. No, we trade. We start with health, we trade it for money, and then we want to do the reverse. And we usually end up losing. This woman has done everything she can try. I mean, think about what doctors would have done back then. How barbaric it would have been. There's no medical schools back then. She has been at the hands of people who they'd be rightly called tormentors today, and she's no better for it. And I bet some of you have tried everything to get well. You've tried everything to get well. Fill in the blank. And you're worse off, and you're poor. But something about her, she doesn't give up hope. She has heard about Jesus, and so she has this another eye, an initiating faith. Now, she is very passive in this healing. She has gone to great lengths her whole life, but all of the works she can do, all of the suffering she can do, all of the spending she could do, but she has to still, to receive healing, initiate her faith. She's heard about Jesus. She's heard about him. That's all we know. She doesn't know a lot about him. She doesn't know that he's even going to die on the cross, that he's going to rise from the dead, that it's very clear that he is the Son of God, that all of history is going to be changed because of his birth, his death, his resurrection, that the calendar that we live by even today is going to be set by the year we knew of his birth. She didn't know any of that. She just reaches out in hope and says, maybe if I just touch him. Some of you don't know jack squat about God. You don't know anything deep about him. But I want to tell you what you need to know. He is the creator of the universe, who loves you so dearly, who wants to bring wholeness and remedy and healing to your soul. All you got to do is reach out and touch what you do know of him. You don't have to give him a bear hug and get your arms all the way around him. I'll tell you a secret. I've been a Christian for a long time. I can't get my arms around Jesus because there's so much there. But I grab onto what I know. Something I want you to notice, though, is there is a whole crowd around Jesus, but only one person gets healed that we hear about in this time. There's other times that Jesus' power, he's so charged up, it's like he's leaking. The faith of the people around him is what it would seem like, because Jesus' power doesn't seem to change. It seems that people's faith is the issue, but there is a crowd around Jesus. And there's often crowds here at this church, but what's sad is only a few reach out to Jesus. Only a few really want to grab a hold of him and find healing in the crowd. When she does, and when you do, there's going to be an instant. Now, I'm not saying that your whole life is going to be, and this is another eye, instantaneously changed every little bit. There is, even in her instance, a process to hear about Jesus, to go to the crowd, to get through the crowd and touch Jesus. It's pretty simple, but it is a process, and healing comes to her. This is why we talk about when somebody becomes a Christian, that there is going from death to life, from darkness to light, from not being born to being born again, new life. There's an instant. And if you haven't experienced that instant, pause this now. Reach out to Jesus. Now, if you paused it in your back, or if you're still with me, I want you to know there's some follow-up. After there is the touch from Jesus, there is some follow-up. He knows power has gone out, and he knows who it is, but he's going, who did this? He wants her to give a public profession. We would talk about baptism now as a public declaration, going under the water, coming out. It's a pretty big deal. It's a pretty big public confession for those who have been healed by Jesus, who have experienced that moment of faith and forgiveness and power coming out from Jesus and immediately stopping the bleeding. And so Jesus says, who was it? Who touched me? And then he says to her, take comfort, take courage, take cheer. This is something only connected with Jesus in the New Testament. Don't you hate it when people say, hey, cheer up? Hey, be brave. I hate hearing that. You know, in the movie Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, one of my least favorite songs in the whole movie, there's some gems in there, but I don't hear anybody singing, cheer up, Charlie, right? Because this song's just super depressing. It's totally detached from hope. But Jesus can say, take courage, be of good cheer, start rejoicing. Only around Jesus and from Jesus is this given in the New Testament. Jesus calls a blind man, and they say, son, be of good cheer. Your sins are forgiven. When this man is lowered through the roof, a woman healed of bleeding, we read about her. It's in Matthew chapter 9. It's in Luke chapter 8 as well. If you want to read additionally, Mark's got the longest account of this woman. He says, your faith has made you whole. Go in peace. Jesus, when he's walking on the water, says to his disciples, be of good cheer. It's me. Don't be afraid. This is before Peter walks on water. Jesus says, don't be afraid. He says in John chapter 16, in this world you will have trouble. But take heart, take courage, be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. Jesus can say this to us. He said it to Paul when Paul was in the middle of a storm on a boat. He heard from the Lord, be of good cheer in Acts chapter 23, verse 11. A lot of us need to hear this, but we need to hear it from Jesus. Be of good cheer. Be of good cheer. So we have seen this interruption, we have seen her infirmity, we have seen her initiating faith, and we see this instantaneous power, but the interruption, let's get back to that. Jairus wants his daughter healed, who's 12 years old. Now Jesus heals somebody who has been sick for 12 years. In the meanwhile, people come and say, Jairus, your daughter's dead. Don't bother the teacher. What if during all of this, Jairus' faith is growing? What if God's going to do more because of the interruption than he could have done without the interruption? Now let's talk about us. I believe God is trying to teach us patience. I believe he's trying to teach us how to pray. I believe he's trying to teach us how to evangelize, that is, tell others the good news about Jesus outside of the walls of a church. I believe he's trying to teach us about submission. I believe he wants to perform miracles right now. I believe he wants Christians to have a good theology of touching people purposefully and unintentionally. You know, there's a lot to be said here about this woman's uncleanliness because she has been bleeding for this long. But what I want you to see and want you to hear is that when unholiness touches holiness, what should happen is holiness takes over the unholiness, not the other way around. And some of you, you're in some dark places right now. And I want you to know that God's power wants to change your situation. He wants to change your life. But Jesus said we would do greater things than he did. He wants our holiness to flow into other people's life. He wants you to be a conduit of his grace, a pipeline of grace to other people through touch. You know, you can't help but read this through the social distancing thing, but friends, we have a theology of touch. Read about it, Christian. Read about how healing power, healing prayer has touching, how ordaining people, setting people apart for ministry has an aspect of touch, how people receiving the Holy Spirit doesn't happen from afar. It happens when people touch others. Faith grows. Jesus invites Thomas, touch me. We need to have a good theology of touch, of being intentional and understanding that we need to be ready for the interruptions. And the faith of Jairus has to get bigger. Jesus doesn't get there in time to make a sick person better. He gets there in time to raise a dead person back to life. I really pray that that's what God's up to in this world right now. That some things that were bad are going to get a whole lot worse so that God's power will be shown to be even greater. And I really believe in the middle, where I think we find ourselves right now, we're not at the end. We're in the middle. God wants to show his power right now as he heals you, as he makes you whole, as he stops some issues that have been going on for years and years and years. Will you initiate your faith? Will you step out? Not focus on your infirmity, but focus on his power. He's a good God. Let's worship him. Let's reach out to him.
You, Lord. Oh, your mercy never fails me. All my days I've been held in your hands. From the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God.
Hey, Sioux Wesleyan Church family, I just have a few announcements for you. First is, obviously we haven't been meeting together for 10 weeks, and what's been on our mind this whole time is how can we get back together again? And we've been making preparations for that, but it's been a little foggy to know when would be the right time for that. Well, in some ways the fog has cleared, and in other ways we see another patch of fog ahead. And so what you know when you drive through fog is you don't immediately speed up to 75 miles an hour when you see another patch of fog coming ahead. So we have, as leadership of the church, intentionally wanted to be a little bit slower than others in this. And I know that will frustrate some of you, but don't miss out on what God is teaching you in the meanwhile. And let me just share with you, in 3 weeks, we plan to have a drive-in church service. Everybody drives to church usually, but stay in your car, and we'll have an FM transmission of a time of worship. We're going to distribute communion elements in a safe way. We got some little disposable cups. We want to gather together. Does that have limitations to it? Absolutely. But we want to make a step in the direction of gathering together again. Second thing I want to tell you about is, again, our helping network. We want to help others. If we want a voice in this community, we need to serve this community. So serve your neighbor, serve your relative, serve your friend, and love them with the love of Christ. But sometimes there's some things that they need that you can't do, that you don't have the skills for, the time for, the resources for. You need the body of Christ around you helping you. And so we have a helping network where we're trying to connect people with resources. Maybe you're not as connected as you wish you were with your neighborhood. You can volunteer to serve others who would make that known. So I want to encourage you, church, share the Helping Network link, SueWesleyan.com/Helping Network, and make sure that we help this community. The third announcement is one that's not an exciting announcement in one sense, but it's a big announcement. And it's been hampered, this transition that I'm going to tell you about, by all of the change that's been going on around us. Many of you know, though, already that the Dotzenberg family, the Coast Guard moved them here. Now, the Coast Guard was man's agent in that, but the supernatural agent in that, we know God has moved them here, and they have loved on us deeply. Kristen is our worship director, and we're sad to see them go, but another way, we know that they're being sent. They're being sent by God, and they're going to be able to love on other people. They're moving to Virginia by the end of this month. And so what can we do? Well, if you have a good relationship with them, I hope you've already found a way to reach out and show them your love. Next several days are going to be busy for them here at the end of May. So make sure that you reach out to them. Know that you can't have 6 hours of their time on the phone, but just reach out to them in a significant way. But something all of us can do is pray for the Dotzenberg family as they go. And we're hoping to schedule a time on Facebook Live. I know it's not perfect, but we're making the most of the opportunity we have. A time on Facebook to pray for them together. And so watch for that in the days to come. And if you miss that, just pray for them now. Just pray for them now that God would send them off in a way with courage, and that he would just open doors for them as they arrive in Virginia. We love them so much. So those are just a few announcements. Probably took longer than I should have with those, but have a wonderful day. And Alexa, order Reese's Pieces for Pastor Brooks.